Hello, listeners. This is Wavecast Radio, broadcasting live as 12 hours of chaos descend upon the nation. Law has vanished, and humanity's darkest instincts take over. Across the nation, citizens prepare for an event that strips away every guarantee of safety. For 12 hours, laws vanish. Crimes that once demanded punishment now carry no consequence. Streets, once governed, become arenas where survival is determined by instinct and resourcefulness alone. Emergency systems are withdrawn entirely. Hospitals lock down or evacuate. Police stations close, leaving communities exposed. The government frames this as a societal safeguard, a way to release collective tension and restore order. Yet in reality, the absence of protection transforms ordinary neighborhoods into hunting grounds. Families reinforce doors, board windows, and rehearse silence. Neighbors assess one another with calculation, weighing trust against necessity. Fear becomes structure. Observation replaces social bonds. Survival is no longer an expectation. It is a measure of preparation and resolve. Tonight, citizens face a system engineered to test resilience, a night where human fragility is on display, and endurance is the only defense. The Purge is presented as a national tradition designed to reset societal equilibrium. Official statements emphasize reduced crime rates and increased economic stability in the months following its occurrence. Behind these claims, however, lies a strategy of control and hierarchy reinforcement. The wealthy isolate themselves behind fortified structures and hire proxies to navigate the chaos on their behalf. Many act indirectly, leveraging the night to advance influence or eliminate rivals. The event disproportionately affects the unprotected, creating predictable outcomes among vulnerable populations. Public messaging stresses responsibility and readiness, yet masks the absence of fairness or intervention. Fear becomes the primary regulator of behavior. Civilians are forced to calculate each decision against immediate threat. Every sound, movement, and shadow carries significance. Anticipation sharpens perception and magnifies tension. The night is not a pause from law, but an amplification of natural instincts. The Purge rewards cunning, decisiveness, and ruthlessness, while punishing hesitation and trust. Civilians confront moral ambiguity on an unprecedented scale. The inception of the Purge traces to crises of economics, crime, and institutional failure. Overcrowded prisons, failing public services, and widespread unrest created fertile ground for radical policy. Leaders proposed a single night in which all criminal activity would be sanctioned, ostensibly as a societal experiment to relieve built-up aggression. Early resistance gave way to normalization as citizens adapted, learning that survival hinged on foresight and preparation rather than ethics. Implementation was controlled, monitored, and codified. Each iteration strengthened the system, integrating it into social and cultural frameworks. The public learned timing, observation, and concealment became as vital as morality once was. The most vulnerable were disproportionately affected, establishing patterns that persisted across demographics. The elite benefited through removal of competition, protection of assets, and reinforcement of social dominance. Over time, the Purge became an expected annual ritual, transforming society from reactive to conditioned. This night is not a deviation, but a reflection of carefully sculpted social engineering. Today, millions brace for its impact. As darkness falls, cities undergo a visible transformation. Streets empty, businesses shutter, homes become fortresses. Silence pervades, yet tension is tangible in every corner. The countdown to the Sirens synchronizes communities, embedding collective anxiety in every household. Observation replaces familiarity. Long-standing social bonds fracture under calculated suspicion. Citizens rehearse hiding, movement, and defensive measures. Every choice is weighed against risk. The absence of public protection magnifies every misstep. Fear becomes precision. Anticipation becomes survival. In these hours, instinct dominates thought. Preparedness and strategic action dictate outcomes more than courage or morality. The city exists in suspended animation, caught between order and chaos, as households adapt to imminent lawlessness. Streets appear empty, yet unseen dynamics of calculation, aggression, and opportunism stir in shadowed corners. This is a carefully orchestrated trial, revealing individual and collective resilience. Tonight tests human adaptability under absolute exposure, where consequences are immediate and unrelenting. When the purge commences, calculation overtakes hesitation. Violence erupts selectively, targeting those exposed or unprepared. Some strike immediately, fueled by vengeance, opportunity, or premeditation. Others conceal, themselves, relying on preparation and caution. Emergency response is non-existent, amplifying risk and magnifying psychological strain. Observers in power track every movement, every reaction, every outcome, gathering intelligence for refinement and continued control. The night is a laboratory for behavior under extreme conditions. Civilians experience fear as both stimulus and environment. Morality yields to necessity, and survival is dictated by resourcefulness, speed, and composure. The sirens are not merely signals, they are instruments of conditioning. Trust dissolves, alliances falter, and neighborhoods transform into ecosystems of calculation and instinct. At dawn, survivors emerge into altered landscapes of trauma, destruction, and awareness. The purge is more than lawlessness. It is an engineered lesson in human vulnerability, power distribution, and endurance. Wavecast Radio will continue to chronicle this night as it unfolds, observing every consequence, every decision, every fracture in the fragile web of society. The government presents the purge as a national ritual, a night of controlled release, where citizens purge themselves of aggression and resentment, restoring balance to society. Official statements emphasize reduced crime rates in subsequent months, improved productivity, and societal stability. The narrative frames the night as a necessary sacrifice, a brutal but beneficial measure designed to cleanse individuals of suppressed impulses. Yet beneath the official language lies a calculated exercise in power and hierarchy reinforcement. The wealthy and influential are insulated, observing from fortified enclaves, or employing agents to exert force indirectly. Vulnerable populations bear the brunt of exposure, ensuring predictable outcomes that consolidate elite dominance. Fear and anticipation are tools, conditioning behavior while maintaining the appearance of voluntary participation. Civilians adapt, calculating each movement, each choice, each interaction against immediate survival needs. The event does not merely release tension, it exposes and magnifies structural inequalities, transforming societal catharsis into orchestrated control. Tonight, as the countdown to lawlessness continues, the difference between freedom and exploitation becomes starkly visible, and the consequences of compliance are revealed in full. The framing of the purge as catharsis obscures its darker reality, while the public is encouraged to view it as a release of societal pressure. Patterns of selection and survival reveal it as a mechanism for social control. Those without protection or resources are systematically endangered, while the elite leverage the night to consolidate power. Economic, social, and political hierarchies are reinforced under the guise of legality and necessity. Citizens internalize the expectation that survival depends on readiness, decisiveness, and opportunism, creating a population trained to anticipate, obey, and adapt to engineered violence. Fear is both instrument and curriculum. The lesson is unmistakable. Vulnerability invites exploitation, and strength ensures security. Psychological conditioning begins weeks, even months, in advance as preparation becomes ritualized. News coverage, government advisories, and social discourse emphasize responsibility, survival, and order, masking the underlying design. Tonight, every household is both participant and subject, every action a reflection of the experiment, and every decision an unwitting contribution to a hierarchy meticulously maintained by power and foresight. The Purge operates as a live demonstration of human behavior under pressure. It isolates citizens from authority, removes recourse, and observes responses in real time. Acts of aggression, preemptive strikes, and survival strategies are all recorded in data streams, analyzed for patterns, and applied to future iterations. While the public perceives lawlessness as spontaneous, it is highly structured and monitored. Those with means benefit disproportionately, and the powerless provide the metrics. Individuals who hesitate, negotiate, or resist are often the first victims, illustrating how indecision is punished while calculated ruthlessness is rewarded. The government's framing of catharsis hides the deliberate orchestration of risk, exploiting human instincts to achieve predictable outcomes. This night is simultaneously destructive and instructive, teaching obedience, conditioning fear, and amplifying inequality. Every city street, every suburban enclave, every urban alleyway becomes a laboratory of strategy and instinct. Participants navigate psychological and physical threats while shaping the narrative of control that the state enforces annually, reinforcing its authority while disguising manipulation as tradition. Fear permeates daily life in the lead-up to the Purge. Streets empty earlier each year, businesses close sooner, and social interaction narrows to essential communication. Anticipation becomes collective conditioning. Communities internalize vigilance as routine. Every household develops protocols, reinforced doors, hidden escape routes, and contingency plans for observation and defense. Trust diminishes in proportion to the proximity of neighbors, and even long-standing relationships are recalibrated against potential risk. Civilians prepare as if engaged in both ritual and experiment, understanding instinctively that the night measures adaptability and decisiveness more than morality. The night does not begin abruptly. It is preceded by a slow, insidious integration into daily life. Observing and interpreting others' actions become critical skills, reinforcing the hierarchy of survival. Anticipation itself becomes a form of governance, conditioning populations to submit to rules dictated by fear, distance, and calculation. In this environment, lawlessness is both imminent and instructive, revealing the fragility of social cohesion and the strength of engineered control. When the sirens signal the start, the illusion of chaos begins. Violence erupts selectively and deliberately, focusing on those least able to defend themselves. Opportunistic aggression dominates urban and suburban spaces alike. Citizens must navigate a landscape where law is absent and risk is amplified. Observers in power record and analyze outcomes, ensuring the perpetuation of structural advantage. The night functions as both spectacle and mechanism, teaching the population that survival depends on strategy, decisiveness, and emotional detachment. Public framing emphasizes civic responsibility, but the reality is uncompromising. Individuals exist as both participants and instruments, in a calculated exercise of domination. By sunrise, the consequences are clear. Communities fractured, trust eroded, hierarchies reinforced, and fear internalized. The Purge is not merely lawlessness or catharsis. It is a controlled, recurring lesson in obedience, hierarchy, and human adaptability under extreme duress. The population emerges altered, conditioned, and aware that these lessons will be repeated, amplified, and enforced in the cycles yet to come. The Purge did not emerge spontaneously. It was conceived during periods of social collapse, economic instability, and surging crime rates. Overcrowded prisons, failing social services, and widespread unemployment created conditions in which conventional law enforcement seemed insufficient. Policy architects proposed a radical solution, a single night in which all criminal activity would be legalized, framed publicly as a societal experiment intended to relieve collective aggression. Early debates focused on ethics, feasibility, and potential backlash, but the urgent climate of fear and uncertainty accelerated acceptance. Initial implementations were carefully monitored, with specific urban sectors designated as experimental zones. Data collection, observation, and controlled intervention allowed policymakers to evaluate human behavior under extreme duress. Citizens were told the night would reduce crime and increase social cohesion, but behind the scenes, officials studied patterns of vulnerability, compliance, and aggression. The night quickly revealed systemic weaknesses, highlighting disparities in wealth, security, and preparedness. Those with means survived consistently, while the unprotected were disproportionately affected. This asymmetry was not accidental. It became apparent that the Purge could serve not only as a social safety valve, but as an instrument of control, shaping populations and consolidating power through calculated exposure to risk. As the event evolved, it moved beyond experimental parameters into institutionalized law. Following early trials, the government codified the Purge as a recurring annual policy, embedding it into the national calendar. Social, economic, and infrastructural systems adapted around the event. Emergency services implemented shutdown protocols. Insurance policies excluded coverage for Purge-related damage. Urban planning incorporated defensive architecture into residential design. The night's existence became normalized, transitioning from extraordinary to routine, and citizens learned to anticipate its arrival. Over time, preparation became ritualized. Households developed strategies for concealment, observation, and defensive engagement. Communities internalized fear as governance, embedding vigilance into daily life. The Purge no longer functioned simply as a cathartic exercise or crime reduction policy. It became a mechanism of societal engineering. Its regularity reinforced hierarchies, and the predictable exposure of vulnerable populations amplified structural inequities. The event's integration into culture, economy, and governance revealed a deliberate design. The orchestration of fear, adaptation, and obedience as instruments of social control. The night's expansion also revealed shifts in human behavior. Citizens adapted in diverse ways. Some learned to hide effectively. Others embraced opportunistic violence. Observers noted psychological conditioning, where repeated exposure to lawlessness normalized calculated aggression and strategic compliance. Children grew up understanding the Sirens before comprehending morality. Neighborhood dynamics evolved. Alliances were temporary, trust became conditional, and observation became an essential survival skill. The elite, meanwhile, maintained complete detachment, observing from fortified positions or employing intermediaries to manipulate outcomes. Wealth and preparation insulated them from consequence, creating a clear asymmetry in survival odds. These patterns reinforced the original purpose of the Purge, now extended beyond temporary release. It became a tool for testing, training, and refining population control. Society adapted to fear as a constant, embedding the event's consequences into behavior, thought, and cultural expectation. The Purge was no longer a reaction to crisis. It had become a shaping force, defining relationships, hierarchies, and daily life. Institutionalization transformed not just behavior, but infrastructure. Cities, suburbs, and communities adopted designs prioritizing defense and observation. Homes incorporated barricades, escape routes, and secure rooms. Commercial districts modified security protocols to limit exposure. Law enforcement and emergency systems developed precise shutdown procedures. Technology was leveraged to monitor activity remotely, reinforcing hierarchy while reducing state exposure. Financial systems reflected the event's influence. Insurance, security services, and private contractors flourished. The night shaped not only survival strategies, but the very economy, embedding the Purge's presence into every aspect of society. By structuring destruction and protection simultaneously, the government created a controlled ecosystem where every citizen's response could be measured, analyzed, and manipulated. The event's evolution revealed a deliberate fusion of terror, observation, and social engineering, where societal adaptation became part of the experiment. Citizens learned through repetition that survival depended on anticipation, resourcefulness, and pragmatism, reinforcing dependence on strategy over spontaneity or morality. As the nation now faces another iteration, the full implications of the Purge's evolution are clear. It is no longer a reactive solution to societal strain, but a calculated institution of governance, embedded into social, economic, and psychological systems. Vulnerable populations remain exposed, predictable, and disproportionately affected. The elite remain insulated, exploiting the event to consolidate power, shape outcomes, and observe behavior without consequence. Preparation has become ritual. Fear has become instinct and participation. Whether active or passive, is compulsory for survival. The Purge has shifted from temporary suspension of law to permanent cultural force, shaping morality, hierarchy, and collective behavior. It has become a test, repeated annually, in which human instinct, ingenuity, and ruthlessness are measured, reinforced, and normalized. Tonight, as the sirens approach, the structures of society bend to the rhythm of sanctioned chaos, and citizens once again confront the enduring consequences of a system designed to manipulate, control, and endure. Wavecast Radio will continue to chronicle these events, observing the unfolding of calculated human behavior under lawless conditions. The Purge does not affect all citizens equally. Its design inherently favors those with wealth, influence, and preparation, while exposing the unprotected to overwhelming risk. The poor, the elderly, the sick, and socially marginalized individuals are disproportionately targeted, their vulnerability exploited by both circumstance and intent. Homes without reinforced doors, neighborhoods without security, and families without resources face the highest likelihood of harm. Meanwhile, the elite retreat to fortified compounds, private enclaves, or monitored observation points, insulated from consequence. Some deploy intermediaries to exact selective violence, further amplifying disparity. Survival, rather than morality or civic virtue, dictates outcomes. Each year, these patterns reinforce social hierarchies, teaching that status, preparation, and resources define safety, while helplessness invites elimination. The government frames the Purge as universal, a societal reset, but in practice, It is a mechanism of control. By embedding inequality into its structure, the event perpetuates fear, obedience, and dependence on preparation, creating a predictable division between those who survive and those who do not. This is not a byproduct. It is the purpose. The night reveals human fragility and institutionalized inequity simultaneously. As anticipation builds, families and communities confront stark choices. Barricades, fortified rooms, and escape routes are essential for survival. Yet not all citizens can afford these measures. Preparedness is directly linked to social and economic status, ensuring that the night's violence disproportionately impacts the unprotected. Vulnerable populations often rely on instinct, improvisation, or concealment, which provides limited defense against calculated aggressors. The wealthy and powerful, insulated by design, experience the event as detached spectacle or strategic advantage rather than existential threat. Patterns of predation are predictable. Neighborhoods with low security see rapid escalation of violence, while fortified areas experience relative calm. This structural asymmetry transforms fear into a tool of compliance and control. Survival is not random. It is engineered, measured, and codified. Citizens internalize the lesson that vulnerability equates to exposure, and exposure invites elimination. Every siren, every shadow, every distant scream becomes evidence of systemic imbalance. The Purge demonstrates clearly that the night's purpose is not civic release. It is a reflection of societal hierarchy under conditions of lawlessness. The impact of inequality extends beyond physical survival into psychological conditioning. Citizens learn early that preparation and resource access are essential to endure the night. Those repeatedly exposed to harm internalize fear, adopting strategies that emphasize caution, concealment, and observation over trust or cooperation. Communities fracture under the weight of suspicion, as neighbors are assessed not as allies, but as potential threats. The absence of equitable protection reinforces the perception that status, wealth, and planning dictate outcomes, teaching compliance and submission to both circumstance and authority. Psychological trauma compounds with each iteration, leaving survivors anxious, vigilant, and distrustful. Fear becomes habitual, guiding behavior before and during the event. The Purge thus reshapes not only social relationships, but mental frameworks, embedding hierarchical awareness and survival prioritization as normalized instinct. Those without means experience the night as a lesson in fragility and exposure, while those with resources experience it as an environment of opportunity, control, and advantage. This imbalance ensures that both power and fear are codified into the collective consciousness. Institutional mechanisms reinforce this inequality. Emergency services withdraw completely, not selectively, creating universal vulnerability. Yet, structural advantage ensures some are effectively protected. Law enforcement and medical systems do not intervene, yet monitoring, reporting, and intervention for the elite persist. Insurance, private security, and technological surveillance create a dual reality. One where citizens navigate terror unaided, and one where power remains insulated. This duality exemplifies the deliberate orchestration of inequity. Vulnerable populations are left to experience consequences directly, their suffering normalized as part of societal function. The elite manipulate observation, selectively applying intervention where strategic advantage aligns. This orchestration transforms the Purge into a mechanism that teaches obedience, survival tactics, and hierarchy recognition. The Night's design leverages fear and exposure to ensure compliance, maintain stratification, and solidify power structures. Citizens are both participants and subjects, experiencing lessons in survival and societal order simultaneously, reinforcing patterns that sustain control beyond the event itself. By the time the sirens signal the start, inequality is fully operationalized. Vulnerable populations face immediate exposure to violence and predation. Resource-rich citizens observe or engage with calculated distance, amplifying the imbalance. Survival is no longer determined by morality, luck, or ethics. It is determined by preparedness, fortification, and privilege. The night structure rewards ruthlessness, observation, and strategic planning, while punishing weakness and unpreparedness. Families and communities are forced to navigate both the physical threats of violence and the psychological weight of systemic vulnerability. The Purge is both tool and lesson, a deliberate reinforcement of societal hierarchy through exposure, calculation, and consequence. When dawn arrives, disparities are evident. Those who survive do so through resources and preparation, while those most vulnerable bear disproportionate losses. The event is not merely lawlessness. It is an institution codifying inequality, fear, and hierarchy, teaching that survival is inseparable from status and capability. Wavecast Radio will continue to chronicle this night, revealing the stark realities beneath the sanctioned chaos. The Purge has become more than a lawless night. It has evolved into a defining cultural ritual. Citizens anticipate it, prepare for it, and integrate its existence into daily life. Social structures bend around the event, dictating schedules, business operations, and community interactions. Even when not active, the threat of the Purge influences behavior, altering relationships, and creating hierarchies based on preparedness, observation, and fortitude. Ordinary citizens experience a mixture of resignation, fear, and calculated anticipation. The government presents the night as a necessary societal reset, emphasizing its supposed benefits: reduced crime, increased efficiency, and societal balance. Yet the lived reality is far harsher. Neighborhoods fracture, trust diminishes, and communities become conditioned to view one another as potential threats. Lawlessness is internalized as a constant, and morality is recalibrated to align with survival. The psychological weight of expectation permeates every household, shaping thought patterns, social interaction, and future planning. The Purge's cultural embedding ensures that every citizen, regardless of participation, remains affected by the night's looming presence, sustaining fear, vigilance, and adaptation throughout the year. Public perception of the Purge is conflicted, but largely normalized. Media narratives, government messaging, and social discourse emphasize civic responsibility, survival strategies, and the necessity of preparation. The elite frame it as entertainment, strategic opportunity, or scientific observation, while citizens internalize it as inevitability. Communities accept the event as unavoidable, instilling routines, rituals, and precautionary practices into household behavior. Fear and observation dominate, and morality is evaluated through a lens of necessity rather than principle. The night becomes a stage where ordinary life intersects with extreme circumstance, and where calculated action determines outcomes. Survivors carry both physical and psychological reminders of previous iterations, shaping decision-making and social interaction. Children grow up internalizing the threat, learning observation, concealment, and strategic adaptation as foundational skills. Cultural acceptance reinforces structural control. The event is no longer perceived purely as chaos, but as a societal expectation. In this environment, preparation, observation, and adaptation are not optional. They are ingrained necessities. Trust becomes conditional, alliances temporary, and vulnerability dangerous. The Purge shapes both community perception and individual identity. The psychological toll extends beyond the night itself. Citizens live under the knowledge that lawlessness will recur, that violence is sanctioned, and that protection is conditional. This anticipation generates anxiety, hypervigilance, and a heightened awareness of risk in everyday situations. Families restructure routines to accommodate precautionary measures. Neighborhoods monitor one another, and communities develop informal hierarchies based on perceived preparedness. Even mundane interactions carry the weight of potential threat. Social bonds are strained as trust erodes, and relationships are evaluated through the lens of survival potential. Children learn caution as instinct rather than lesson. Adults operate within a dual reality, the regulated daylight world and the looming night of sanctioned chaos. This duality shapes behavior, decision-making, and interpersonal dynamics. The event is experienced as both tradition and trauma, embedding fear and tactical awareness into daily life. Cultural normalization masks the brutality beneath, creating a society where lawlessness is both routine and instrumental in shaping perception, behavior, and social order. The night's cyclical nature amplifies societal divides. The wealthy, insulated by resources, experience the Purge as strategic, almost recreational, while the unprotected confront existential threat. Observers track patterns of vulnerability, reinforcing hierarchies that ensure compliance and perpetuate exposure. The psychological impact extends across generations, conditioning children, adolescents, and adults to accept preparation and observation as integral to life. Communities become stratified based on resilience, fortification, and resource access. Moral choices are reframed through the prism of survival, further entrenching behavioral adaptation. Fear is both instructive and regulatory, teaching submission to circumstance while reinforcing hierarchy. The Purge instills long-term vigilance, shaping how citizens interact, govern themselves, and anticipate future iterations. Over time, the night's effects accumulate, creating a society both conditioned by and dependent upon its rituals. Survival strategies become cultural norms, influencing social interactions, neighborhood dynamics, and even governance practices. The Purge is no longer simply an event. It is a pervasive influence, shaping the way society perceives danger, trust, and opportunity. Despite the terror, many citizens comply with or even embrace the night's expectations. Preparation, observation, and strategic adaptation dominate household and community life. Alliances form and dissolve based on immediate necessity, while fear informs every choice. Survivors carry the consequences of both their own actions and the unpredictability of others, embedding lessons in caution, opportunism, and resource management. Communities exist in a state of conditional trust, where social bonds are reinforced by preparedness and weakened by perceived vulnerability. The night's cultural entrenchment ensures continuity, transmitting knowledge, strategy, and fear across generations. While official messaging frames the Purge as societal cleansing, the lived reality is a complex interplay of psychology, adaptation, and social control. Citizens internalize lessons of survival, hierarchy, and observation, creating a population both conditioned and constrained by the event. As the night approaches, the balance of anticipation, preparation, and fear defines daily life, illustrating how a single, annual lawless period can permanently transform culture, perception, and human behavior. Wavecast Radio continues to chronicle the unfolding consequences, revealing the enduring imprint of sanctioned chaos on American society. As the Purge approaches, the fissures in society become increasingly visible. Streets empty earlier than ever. Homes are fortified with boards, locks, and hidden rooms, and neighborhoods transform into isolated fortresses. Citizens observe one another warily, weighing potential threats against alliances, old relationships against immediate survival needs. The night functions as a magnifying lens, revealing disparities in wealth, preparedness, and social status. The powerful remain insulated, their fortifications advanced, their strategies pre-planned, while the vulnerable rely on instinct, improvisation, and fragile defenses. Trust erodes, replaced by constant evaluation of motives and capability. The social fabric stretches thin under pressure as neighbors become observers, rivals, or prey. Psychological tension escalates, and the city takes on a sense of anticipatory paralysis. Every decision carries heightened consequences. Families and communities alike feel the weight of calculated uncertainty. Fear becomes habitual, shaping thought patterns, behavior, and perception long before the first siren blares, conditioning citizens to accept both the inevitability and selectivity of violence. The Purge is not merely a night of lawlessness. It is a systematic exposure of societal fragility and inequity. The psychological toll extends beyond anticipation into profound behavioral conditioning. Citizens internalize the necessity of vigilance, observation, and rapid decision-making. Children grow up absorbing fear as instinct, learning that trust is conditional and safety is earned. Communities develop informal hierarchies based on preparedness and perceived competence. Social bonds are redefined by proximity to resources and the capacity to respond to threat. Morality becomes flexible, secondary to strategy and survival. The night's annual recurrence amplifies these patterns, embedding anticipation, readiness, and fear into daily life. Even mundane decisions are influenced by prior experience, past trauma, or expectations of the upcoming purge. Psychological resilience is tested, and the constant expectation of threat reshapes behavior, thought, and interpersonal dynamics. Citizens are trained not by authority or law, but by fear, exposure, and observation. The result is a society highly attuned to danger, hierarchically stratified, and conditioned to respond to both immediate and projected threats. This is the lasting imprint of the night. Fear as instruction, hierarchy as natural order, and survival as constant calculation. Societal divides intensify under the pressure of exposure. Wealth, social status, and access to protection determine not only survival, but psychological security. Fortified neighborhoods see relative calm, while impoverished areas experience concentrated violence. Observers note patterns. Those with means survive repeatedly, while the unprotected are predictably exposed to harm. This repeated stratification reinforces social hierarchy, creating a population acutely aware of disparity. Communities fragment along these lines. Trust becomes provisional, and alliances are temporary. Emotional and psychological distance grows, even among close neighbors and extended families. The Purge functions as both spectacle and instrument, dramatizing inequality while normalizing it. Citizens internalize lessons about privilege, danger, and opportunity, adapting behavior to reflect the realities of exposure. Morality and empathy are tested against practicality and fear. Survival, rather than virtue, becomes the dominant measure of success. The night's structure ensures that inequality is not incidental, but systemic, observable, and reinforced, cementing social divisions through exposure, observation, and consequence. Fear operates as both motivator and regulator. Anticipation shapes behavior weeks, months, or even years in advance. Citizens monitor neighbors, assess threats, and implement defensive strategies based on projected risk. Household dynamics shift toward authority, discipline, and strategic compliance, reinforcing control within families as a microcosm of society. Children learn vigilance, concealment, and observation before understanding morality. Communities adapt, teaching collective awareness, rapid decision-making, and contingency planning. The psychological imprint is profound, embedding lessons of preparedness, hierarchy, and resource management into the cultural and familial fabric. These adaptations extend beyond the night, influencing everyday interactions, decision-making, and social cohesion. The Purge becomes a psychological framework, conditioning populations to respond to exposure, anticipate danger, and navigate inequality. Trust, once implicit, becomes tactical. Observation replaces assumption. Survival requires constant evaluation, and the cognitive weight of this vigilance shapes perception, reasoning, and interpersonal strategy indefinitely. Fear becomes permanent, strategic, and instructive. By the time the sirens signal commencement, these social and psychological patterns are fully operational. Streets, homes, and neighborhoods function as extensions of strategy and preparation. Citizens anticipate, calculate, and respond to both external threats and the psychological weight of inequality. Decisions are guided by observation, experience, and strategic analysis, rather than morality or impulse. Vulnerable populations are acutely aware of exposure. Their response is informed by prior iterations and ingrained caution. The elite operate with insulation, observing or exploiting the environment with minimal risk. The night structure magnifies disparities while conditioning behavior, reinforcing hierarchy, and ensuring continued compliance. Survival is measured by preparation, decisiveness, and resourcefulness, while morality yields to instinct and strategy. Communities emerge fractured, perception of trust permanently altered, and psychological scars extend long after the sirens fall silent. The Purge leaves behind not only physical destruction, but a society conditioned by fear, stratification, and survivalist behavior. Wavecast Radio continues to document these developments, revealing the subtle, enduring, and calculated transformations imposed by a night designed to expose the deepest societal divides. As the Purge draws near, households transform into fortified bastions. Boards seal windows, locks are reinforced, and every entry point becomes a calculated risk assessment. Families rehearse escape routes, hiding strategies, and contingency plans. Observation is constant. Neighbors are scrutinized, streets are monitored, and potential threats are cataloged mentally. The night requires more than instinct. It demands strategy, timing, and resource allocation. Essentials are stockpiled: food, water, tools, and defensive equipment, ensuring that survival is based on preparation rather than luck. Communication systems are established to coordinate with trusted allies, while distant observation ensures that unverified individuals are treated with caution. The psychological weight of preparation is immense. Every decision carries consequence, every miscalculation magnified by absence of protection. In this environment, families internalize fear as both motivator and guide, shaping behavior to align with the realities of sanctioned chaos. The Purge becomes not only a test of endurance, but a measure of foresight and resourcefulness. Strategy and vigilance dictate life and death, transforming ordinary households into tactical units, capable of withstanding both external threat and internal panic. Communities develop informal networks to maximize survival odds. Residents coordinate observation, share information, and create temporary alliances. Neighborhoods without natural fortifications rely heavily on collaboration, improvisation, and discreet monitoring. Trust is conditional and constantly reassessed, often determined by perceived competence, resource access, or prior behavior. Strategic planning extends to every corner: street patrols, signal systems, and fallback locations. While law enforcement is absent, communities assume dual roles of self-defense and risk management. Preparation becomes a social exercise, reflecting hierarchy and resource distribution. Those unable or unwilling to adapt are predictably vulnerable, emphasizing the structural inequities embedded in the Purge. Observation, timing, and psychological awareness are elevated above physical capability alone. The night is as much about understanding human behavior as defending against it. Citizens learn quickly that alliances may be temporary, that deception is common, and that survival is dictated by adaptability. Every detail, from boarding placement to food rationing, carries significance in the balance of safety and exposure. Individuals who embrace the night approach it as opportunity. Some use preparation not only for survival, but to assert dominance, exact revenge, or settle personal scores. Strategic positioning, reconnaissance, and calculated aggression provide advantages. These participants exploit both the unprepared and the observant alike, reinforcing the night's brutal hierarchy. The Purge rewards foresight, ruthlessness, and opportunism. Observation becomes both defensive and offensive. Even families devoted to concealment must recognize the potential for intrusion by the methodical. Preparation is therefore multifaceted, encompassing defense, psychological readiness, and understanding of human behavior. Survival is never passive. It requires awareness of threats from within and beyond the household. Every action is measured, every risk assessed. The night transforms ordinary individuals into analysts, tacticians, and improvised strategists, ensuring that survival hinges on intelligence and resourcefulness rather than luck. The Purge becomes a crucible, testing planning, observation, and adaptability with unforgiving intensity. Psychological conditioning intensifies through preparation. The anticipation of violence primes vigilance, sharpens perception, and accelerates response time. Citizens internalize fear as instruction, training reflexes, judgment, and decision-making under stress. Children observe and participate, learning observation, concealment, and tactical thinking as essential skills. Adults adapt routines, prioritizing safety and preparedness above routine comfort. The cumulative effect is a population conditioned to operate under threat, capable of assessing risk, deploying resources, and making rapid, high-stakes decisions. Homes function as controlled environments for rehearsal and survival experimentation. Mistakes are minimized. Observation of neighbors and intruders informs strategy. Preparation is both physical and cognitive, shaping perception, thought, and action simultaneously. By instilling discipline, vigilance, and adaptability, households condition themselves to endure 12 hours of sanctioned chaos with maximal efficiency. The Purge thus extends beyond the night itself, embedding survivalist behavior into everyday life. When the sirens signal commencement, preparation becomes action. Barricades are tested under tension, escape routes are implemented, and observation converts into engagement or avoidance. Families execute rehearsed strategies while adjusting in real time to unanticipated threats. Success depends on cohesion, adaptability, and psychological composure. Even the most fortified homes face vulnerability, and the unpredictability of human behavior ensures constant reassessment. Communities watch one another, tracking movement and gauging compliance or threat potential. The night rewards calculation, resourcefulness, and decisiveness, while punishing hesitation, oversight, or misplaced trust. Every household is simultaneously participant, observer, and defender, navigating both external danger and internal tension. The Purge becomes an exercise in applied strategy, psychological endurance, and adaptive planning, demonstrating that survival is an intricate balance of preparation, observation, and execution. Wavecast Radio will continue to chronicle the unfolding dynamics of this night, revealing the painstaking strategies and human ingenuity deployed under relentless lawlessness. The sirens signal the start, and the streets erupt into a theater of calculated chaos. Violence unfolds, quickly, punctuated by screams, shattering glass, and sudden movement. Those who have embraced the night for aggression act decisively, stalking streets and alleys, preying on the unprepared. Observation becomes instinct, anticipation a survival tool. Ordinary citizens scramble to defend themselves, relying on barricades, concealment, and psychological acuity. The absence of law enforcement amplifies danger. No intervention exists to halt escalating attacks. Patterns emerge as methodical participants exploit gaps in fortifications, vulnerabilities in preparation, and predictable human reactions. Opportunism thrives, and even the previously cautious face unpredictability from both strangers and familiar faces. Survival depends on rapid assessment, strategic mobility, and emotional regulation. The Purge transforms the city into a dynamic landscape of threat, testing both ingenuity and instinct. Each encounter becomes a microcosm of power, adaptation, and calculated decision-making. The night exposes fragility, revealing how quickly societal norms dissolve under pressure and how instinct governs behavior in the absence of consequence. Fear dictates movement and strategy across communities. Neighborhoods once cohesive fragment into isolated units. Observation extends beyond individual households to entire streets, intersections, and corridors. Every sound, shadow, and motion is interpreted as threat or opportunity. Families and groups adjust tactics in real time, shifting barricades, relocating, and reallocating resources. The psychological weight is immense, as hesitation can be fatal. Even routine actions are scrutinized for potential exposure. Citizens internalize the night's logic. Survival requires preemptive thinking, adaptability, and rapid execution. Individuals balance aggression and defense, navigating the fluid dynamics of an environment where rules are suspended and danger is omnipresent. Trust becomes provisional, alliances temporary, and morality secondary to survival calculus. The Purge functions as a crucible, revealing human instincts stripped of social conditioning, exposing both capacity for violence and ingenuity under extreme duress. Every choice carries immediate consequence. Every observation transforms into actionable intelligence. Human behavior during the Purge demonstrates extremes of adaptability. Some band together for protection, pooling resources, establishing observation points, and coordinating defensive strategies. Others isolate, relying on concealment, patience, and calculated inaction to avoid detection. Aggressors exploit weaknesses, leveraging fear and unpredictability to dominate territory or secure advantage. Opportunistic violence is both spontaneous and premeditated, blending instinct with learned strategy. Participants assess risk constantly, weighing potential gain against exposure and probability of retaliation. The absence of intervention sharpens observation, hones strategy, and accelerates decision-making. Every household, corridor, and intersection becomes a microcosm of strategy, hierarchy, and human behavior. individuals confront the duality of self-preservation and opportunism, oscillating between defensive tactics and offensive calculation. Psychological pressure intensifies as the night progresses, testing resilience, composure, and ingenuity. The cityscape itself becomes an instrument of human behavior, revealing both vulnerability and tactical capacity in equal measure. The night exposes moral ambiguity and instinctual drive. Neighbors may turn predator or protector without warning. Alliances can fracture in seconds, and decisions hinge on immediate survival needs. Observers note a blend of premeditated aggression and reactive instinct, illustrating how quickly conventional morality dissolves under lawlessness. Fear and opportunity intermingle, producing unpredictable outcomes. Victims are determined not by guilt or innocence, but by visibility, preparedness, and adaptability. Strategic thinking overrides empathy, while opportunistic aggression is rewarded. Communities adapt or disintegrate, families survive or perish, and individual choices are magnified into collective consequences. The Purge operates as both experiment and reality, a demonstration of human behavior under extreme conditions, where observation, decision-making, and execution dictate survival. Citizens are tested physically, psychologically, and socially, forced to navigate a landscape devoid of protection, yet saturated with threat. The night's lessons are immediate, visceral, and unforgettable, embedding both fear and tactical insight into every participant's psyche. As the hours unfold, chaos intensifies, and patterns of dominance emerge. Streets transform into arenas of strategy, concealment, and predation. Citizens employ both pre-planned tactics and adaptive improvisation, constantly recalibrating responses based on evolving threat landscapes. The elite observe from secure locations, detached yet informed, reinforcing the asymmetry between the insulated and the exposed. Survival becomes a function of observation, rapid assessment, and execution, while indecision invites peril. Communities and families adjust dynamically, relocating, barricading, and negotiating threats in real time. The Purge magnifies both human ingenuity and vulnerability, transforming familiar spaces into zones of calculated risk. Psychological endurance is tested alongside physical survival, teaching lessons about hierarchy, preparedness, and adaptability. By dawn, those who endure have navigated not just physical threats, but a comprehensive landscape of human behavior, strategy, and cruelty. Wavecast Radio continues to chronicle these unfolding dynamics, illustrating how the Purge transforms ordinary citizens into participants in a high-stakes, socially engineered experiment in human nature and lawlessness. During the Purge, violence is not random. It is deliberate, strategic, and psychologically manipulative. Predators exploit fear, assessing weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and behavioral patterns of their targets. Neighbors, once familiar and trusted, become sources of danger. Families learn to anticipate betrayal, understanding that survival may demand defensive or preemptive measures. Attackers calculate timing, environment, and potential response, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty that magnifies terror. The absence of law enforcement ensures that consequences are suspended, allowing human behavior to express its rawest instincts. Fear is weaponized, shaping decisions and reinforcing hierarchies. Victims experience not only physical threat, but the cognitive strain of constant vigilance. Psychological warfare is pervasive. Deception, intimidation, and observation are as lethal as physical aggression. Participants are forced to navigate an intricate network of risks, balancing concealment, strategic action, and emotional endurance. The night is a sustained experiment in human behavior, with each act of aggression reinforcing the reality that no sanctuary is absolute and no trust guaranteed. Survival requires acute awareness, rapid decision-making, and the ability to exploit opportunities while mitigating exposure. Manipulation of perception is central to the Purge's psychological dynamics. Shadows, noises, and movement become tools for both predators and prey. Attackers exploit sensory cues to induce panic or misdirect attention. Victims must interpret ambiguous signals accurately, determining whether a creaking floorboard indicates intrusion or a false alarm. The psychological burden of constant assessment is immense, compounding stress and heightening susceptibility to error. Families establish roles, routines, and contingency plans to counteract both visible and invisible threats. Observation transforms into anticipatory defense, requiring constant cognitive engagement. The night encourages pattern recognition, tactical reasoning, and preemptive decision-making. Those who misjudge intent or overestimate safety become immediate targets. In this environment, psychological resilience is as critical as physical fortification. The Purge transforms every street, home, and corridor into a laboratory of perception, strategy, and instinct, where mistakes carry immediate and sometimes irreversible consequences. Fear is intensified by unpredictability and betrayal. Even familiar individuals can exploit trust to inflict harm, creating a pervasive climate of suspicion. Alliances, temporary or long-standing, are constantly evaluated and tested. Families and communities must anticipate both external attacks and potential internal threats, balancing defensive action with strategic deception. Participants deploy psychological tactics to destabilize, mislead, and intimidate, amplifying the chaotic dynamics of the night. Observation and calculation determine the flow of violence as predators exploit hesitation, panic, and overconfidence. Citizens internalize lessons of vigilance, judgment, and adaptability, responding to cues that signal threat or opportunity. Psychological warfare transforms ordinary environments into complex arenas of uncertainty, where survival depends on both perceptive acuity and decisive action. Every decision, whether to trust, hide, flee, or confront, carries amplified significance. The Purge reinforces the understanding that human behavior, when stripped of consequence, becomes both unpredictable and manipulable, creating a landscape where fear itself dictates action. The deliberate targeting during the Purge magnifies inequality and strategic advantage. Those with resources, information, or fortifications are less susceptible to psychological manipulation, while the unprepared face compounded vulnerability. Attackers observe patterns of behavior, exploiting predictable responses to fear, proximity, or exposure. Strategic aggression is reinforced, rewarding foresight, timing, and understanding of human psychology. Communities fragment under pressure, and individuals are compelled to navigate constant evaluation of friend, foe, and opportunity. The night is an ongoing exercise in risk assessment, behavioral prediction, and emotional endurance. Even mundane actions, such as leaving a room or adjusting a barricade, become high-stakes decisions. Psychological pressure intensifies as the night progresses, demanding flexibility, awareness, and rapid recalibration. Each encounter leaves a cognitive imprint, teaching survivors to anticipate, deceive, or exploit in future iterations. The Purge is both social experiment and lived reality, where human behavior is weaponized against itself, and survival hinges on understanding, anticipating, and manipulating the dynamics of fear. By the final hours, psychological warfare reaches its peak. Fatigue, heightened stress, and relentless threat distort perception, increasing the likelihood of error and exploitation. Predators leverage every lapse, hesitation, and misjudgment. Survivors adapt, improvising strategies under pressure, relying on observation, cunning, and resilience to endure. The night becomes a masterclass in human instinct, strategic reasoning, and behavioral adaptation. Lessons learned are immediate, tangible, and often brutal. By sunrise, the cognitive and emotional toll is evident. Trust is shattered, alliances are reevaluated, and the population is conditioned to anticipate the next purge. The event leaves behind more than physical destruction. It imprints lasting psychological consequences, shaping perception, behavior, and social interaction for months, years, and even generations. Wavecast Radio continues to document this intricate interplay of threat, strategy, and human nature, revealing how calculated violence and psychological manipulation define the enduring reality of the Purge. As the final hours of the Purge unfold, the city becomes unrecognizable, a macabre landscape of shattered glass, burning vehicles, and abandoned bodies. Shadows twist into threats, every corner concealing the possibility of sudden violence. Screams pierce the night, some from attackers, others from victims caught in desperate struggle. The air is thick with smoke, fear, and the stench of blood. Families huddle behind barricades, trembling as if the walls themselves might betray them. Humans, once bound by law and morality, act with raw, predatory instinct. The night strips civilization bare, revealing the darkness lurking beneath polite facades. Every movement is calculated, every sound assessed, every heartbeat measured against the rhythm of terror. Survival is not heroic, it is savage. Friends become foes, strangers become hunters, and hesitation becomes death. The Purge tests not only strength, but the fragility of conscience, forcing citizens to confront the unbearable truth. Lawlessness transforms humans into monsters when consequence is removed. Every scream, every snap of a door, every distant cry reinforces the horror, ensuring the night leaves a permanent scar on both body and psyche. Inside homes, the terror is magnified by proximity. Children cling to parents, parents clutch weapons, and every creak of a floorboard is a potential death sentence. Neighbors, once familiar, can become predators in seconds, wielding calculated violence with mechanical precision. Some individuals hunt methodically, using psychological insight to torment victims before striking. Panic spreads like wildfire, amplifying mistakes and creating chaos that predators exploit. The sense of safety is illusionary, and no barricade guarantees survival. Victims are forced to make impossible decisions, betray, flee, or fight. Every choice carries lethal consequence, and hesitation invites the finality of violence. The Purge transforms intimacy into danger, routine into terror, and humanity into survival instinct. Families learn that protection is temporary, trust is a liability, and the night rewards only cunning, ruthlessness, and feral resolve. Wavecast Radio chronicles these moments of unrelenting horror, recording the grotesque choreography of fear, violence, and human desperation as it unfolds in real time. In the streets, chaos reigns as the line between hunter and hunted dissolves. Bodies litter intersections, abandoned vehicles become traps, and fires illuminate the grotesque tableau. Aggressors move with predatory intent, exploiting panic, fatigue, and fear to maximize destruction. Survivors navigate a labyrinth of psychological and physical danger, balancing instinct with calculated action. Observation and improvisation are paramount. One misstep, is fatal. The night tests not only physical endurance, but the limits of sanity, forcing individuals to reconcile the horror of witnessing murder with the necessity of survival. Some succumb to terror, their screams punctuating the air, while others act with chilling efficiency, turning fear into strategy. Trust evaporates as morality becomes a luxury, replaced by instinct, calculation, and opportunism. Each encounter leaves a mark on the body, on the psyche, and on the social consciousness. The Purge reduces the city to a monstrous arena, exposing the raw, unfiltered brutality of human nature. In this environment, terror is both tool and teacher, guiding every decision and ensuring every moment is charged with lethal intensity. The psychological toll of the night is relentless. Survivors, forced to endure exposure, betrayal, and calculated aggression, are traumatized in ways that will persist long after the sirens cease. Sleep becomes haunted by images of violence, and every shadow provokes instinctive fear. Communities are fractured, families carry invisible wounds, and children internalize lessons of survival before they understand morality. The Purge transforms perception itself. Every sound, movement, or expression becomes potential threat. Even the dawn does not offer relief. The memory of terror lingers, etched into every mind, altering behavior, relationships, and trust indefinitely. Ordinary citizens learn that safety is conditional, law is an illusion, and human nature can collapse into predation when authority withdraws. The horror is both immediate and permanent, shaping how society functions and how individuals exist within it. The night is not simply over at sunrise. It leaves a psychological landscape scarred by violence, fear, and unrelenting dread. When the sirens finally signal the end, the aftermath is grotesque and profound. Streets are littered with the remains of the night, shattered bodies, scorched structures, and silent witnesses to unimaginable cruelty. Survivors emerge physically intact, yet psychologically fractured, haunted by the memory of friends turned foes, homes invaded, and lives extinguished. The city, though returning to a semblance of normalcy, bears the visible and invisible marks of trauma. Trust is irreparably damaged, communities are permanently fractured, and fear has become instinct. The Purge has stripped civilization to its barest core, revealing the darkness inherent in humanity when rules, law, and consequence are removed. It is a relentless, cyclical nightmare, a government-sanctioned experiment in terror, hierarchy, and survival that leaves permanent psychological scars. Wavecast Radio bears witness to every atrocity, every scream, and every desperate act, documenting the horrors that define both the night and the fragile humanity that survives it.